go through and actually present. So, guys, thanks for joining us today for the first session. It's taking a second for my PowerPoint to actually get up. And let's get over here to the agenda. So today we want to start off with kind of going through the Microsoft licensing, right? It's one thing that I've noticed over talking to a lot of different companies and even in my past lives that I've seen where things are just left unhinged, where people don't know what all is actually there. Even some people from Microsoft don't always know what's actually in the licensing. So, again, my name's Daniel Morris. I've been in the industry for 24 years or so now. Worked through system administrator roles, through management roles, and different pieces. And this is just a thought from me of just where we're at today in this marketplace, and kind of understanding the navigating the landscape, right? So when we talk about the differences between the enterprise suite, the frontline, education, government, and then you start looking at the business basic, standard, and premium licenses, what's included in those, right? Do I have the right thing for what I'm trying to go after and what I'm trying to accomplish for my business practice? And it's one of those things that when you hear most people talk, they ask you if you have an E5 license, if you have the Microsoft Enterprise E5 license, and that's because that's Microsoft's gold standard. It's got all the security features that you think you need, and we'll talk about some additional security features throughout this call as well. And then for the frontline workers, how does that actually fit in? Do you have people that are, client facing, people that are working in warehouses or some other type of selling mode? You might be able to use frontline. And then you have education, of course, for their college systems or high schools, elementary schools, things like that that can actually come into play depending on where you're at. And then you have the government licensing that's really for any of those DOT governments or DOD. And then you also have any of those other companies that might be working with governments as contractors that could qualify for some of the government licensing. And then you have the business standard that they incorporate some things. It's almost going back to when Microsoft tried to include everything into one server. I don't know how many people remember the small business servers that were out there, but Microsoft tried to include everything that was not best practice into one best practice server unit. It's kind of how the business standard license is actually built out along with the business basic. You get a maximum of 300 users with that. And it's something that doesn't always include all the security features that you actually need. And it doesn't include most of the other features that the licenses that we're going to talk about as far as focusing on the enterprise E5 series actually includes. And the reason I'm going to focus on the Enterprise E5 series today is when we start talking about the Enterprise license suite, you look at the E3 and the E5, you get limited security features, limited compliance features, and it doesn't include a true EDR solution within the E3. But where you start getting into the E5 or E5 security, you start getting enhanced security measures. You start getting the enhanced compliance measures. And it also includes a full XDR solution, not just the EDR solution, right? So when we talk about EDR, it's extended detect and response. XDR is, covering a lot more than just that. It's really encompassing multiple products to try to get a full focus. When we talk about compliance, most people overlook compliance because it's just, labeling on files is way most people look at it. It's actually your data security and tooling. And a lot of companies look at those other the enterprise licensing, and they look at this as You either have to have one or none. They don't look at the mix and match. So when you start talking about mixing and matching, you can have the frontline worker licenses along with your enterprise licenses to cover the users. As long as your users are covered in the numbers that you have, that's the correct setup. One thing that I've actually noticed when we talk about mix and match is that people will upgrade licenses, and it's something to call out to go check in any environment that you work in or you look in. They'll go to upgrade their license from, say, just Office E5, which does include Defender for Office P1 and P2 as far as security concerns, but they forget that they have the enterprise, or not the enterprise, but the Intra ID P2. And sorry for the name confusion because it used to be called Azure AD. Now we've got a name change, of course, with Microsoft changing names every time we turn around. So when you start talking about Intra ID P2, people will forget that they're paying for that. They'll upshift their license to an E5 and have that add-on that's in there that they're paying additional money for that they don't really need because it's actually included in the license. One thing that I want to mention again is the Microsoft Business licenses. It doesn't matter if you use basic, standard, or what. If you're over the 300 user mark, you should look at changing your license because you're actually already out of compliance with Microsoft. Any questions so far on just any of this, guys, or is this pretty much making sense, or did you come for the Defender tips at the next section? All right. So let's talk about what security is actually in the E5 license itself. So when we talk about the security that's in the Microsoft licensing, a lot of times that you forget that, not only do you have Defender for Endpoint, but also you've got Defender for Office 365, Defender for Cloud Apps, Defender for Identity, and also the Microsoft Intra offerings. And Microsoft does cover multiple platforms. There's a lot of great content out there on that as far as how to integrate those into Intune or use Defender for Cloud. We can get into those in deeper sessions at a later time, and I would love to get some other speakers in to actually do that. And then you've got the forgotten security. So these are pieces that when we talk about licenses, I really wanted to call out. When we talk about forgotten security in E5, we have customer key, which does anybody know what customer key does before I actually go into it too much? Is anybody currently using it? Okay, so customer key is encryption at rest. So that's going to encrypt any of your email, SharePoint, OneDrive, any data that's actually sitting still, or stagnant. When you start talking about encryption.
Quiet time.
When you start talking about encryption,
Right.
a lot of times we're thinking about encryption from a policy standpoint, such as from Purview or from Exchange itself. The encryption service that we're talking about with a customer key is actually just data at rest. So that's something that's in your E5 license that you should definitely check out if you're using it or if you're working with clients that use it or anything like that. Go and check that one out. The next one is customer lockbox. Customer lockbox actually gives you the ability to lock out Microsoft from your tenant so that they have to make a formal request. So for example, if you are working with a client, you have to go seek help from Microsoft to connect to the tenant, and the Microsoft support representative goes to connect. They have to make a request to not only a board inside Microsoft, but also to whoever the given party is within that corporation to be able to access that tenant. And there's full tracking and transparency on what they get access to, what they touch, and it's time limited. So in other words, you only get 12 hours to accept the request, and you only get 4 hours once the access is granted. It's a great feature to keep up with, and it's a great feature to know whenever you're talking to anybody, it's an easy call out for that Microsoft E5 license that most people are not using. A lot of companies, such as banking industry or finance industry, even some healthcare services, depending on where you're located, what compliances that you have to actually follow. This would be one that you might want to look and see if you should already be following it, or if you should be following customer key and hosting your own encryption keys for the service. Now, keep in mind, Microsoft already encrypts and offers encryption keys for data at rest. This is just for when we talk about customer keys, that is for the customer to host their own keys. One other call out for the forgotten security in E5 is actually insider risk management. It's part of the purview licensing, just like customer key and customer lockbox. But a lot of times this one's overlooked. But this actually prevents information from being leaked out of sensitive data, as far as data spillage and stuff outside the company, confidentiality violations, intellectual property, as far as custom projects, internal projects that you might be working on. It can also work against fraud and insider trading. And regulatory compliance violations. The way that this actually works is it actually tracks all movement of documents that are already labeled, but it also tracks documents that have certain information types located within the document itself. And it will actually work across your email, SharePoint, OneDrive, any external shares, and be able to capture that information for you. So most of everybody that's on here probably knows what's in the E5. Hopefully these forgotten pieces of security that's in E5 give you some help, but I really want to talk about additional security features within Microsoft before we dive into some tips. So what about servers? When we talk about servers themselves, a lot of old school thought process for some clients or companies that you may run across, whether you work for them or whether you go to take and do consulting with them, will look at using Defender for Endpoint P2 licenses for their servers. That is actually a bad practice. And the reason I say that is because they're missing out on some freebies that Microsoft's actually offering that's a little bit increased security scaling. So when we start talking about the difference between Defender for Endpoint P2 and Defender for Server P1, P2 includes, or P1 includes everything that Defender for Endpoint includes, but it also includes a foundational version of CSPM, or Cloud Security Posture Management. It also gives you the ability to do all of your policies through Intune. And it gives you the ability to use Azure Arc to actually onboard those devices, so you can utilize Azure Arc for other support purposes in a later time. Usually the cost is the same as Defender for Endpoint P2 licenses. You also get some compliance regulations within Defender for Cloud that you don't get with just having the Defender for Endpoint P2 license. And with the compliance regulations that you throw in with Defender for Cloud, you can actually take and apply those through Compliance Manager, which is located in the Purview suite, in the Purview portal itself. So you can actually monitor not only the compliances of the servers, but the compliance of your entire tenant and organization across those same pieces. For Defender for Cloud, each section, of course, has its own cost, so I'm not really going to cover that. But Defender for CSPM lives under Defender for Cloud as far as the umbrella itself. Defender for Cloud actually integrates with Azure Arc, Microsoft Defender as far as the security portal. It also integrates in with Intune for policy management, and it combines the capabilities of not only looking at your DevSec operations, but your cloud security posture management and your cloud workload protection. It's honestly really easy to use, and part of the tips that I'm going to show you is how you can adopt any of the servers that you run across into Defender for Cloud. pretty easily if they're already using Defender for Endpoint on those servers. The next one is Cloud Security Posture Management. It identifies and remediates risk just through automation, visibility, uninterrupted monitoring, threat detection, and remediation workloads. It's also got the governance management piece in it. So when it says responsible parties or time frame to correct, this is where a lot of the accountability comes in, because you can assign different parties or departments task within CSPM to actually be able to maintain that somebody's actually taking care of the issue, how quickly they're actually taking care of it, where they're at with that remediation, and how long it took them to keep up with it. And that gives you the accountability within the organization for that one. One of the things that I like about the cloud security posture management is, yes, this part is paid, but you get some foundational pieces of it under Defender for Cloud without having to go that far. You can't do the responsible parties piece or keep up with the accountability, but you do get to actually see what's actually going on from there. The next one we'll talk about is the Defender for External Attack Surface Management, or EASM. This one I recommend to everybody, and I'll give you a freebie on this one from what we've noticed from using it. And this is something we found out not too long after it came out. You can actually go spin this up in any environment, run it for 30 days, shut it back down, be able to see exactly what who's associated with your SSLs, who's associated with the IP addresses, or even the websites that's associated with your current organization. And from this, you can actually see any open ports that you have, any not only name associations, but address, phone number associations that you have. And you can actually see if there is vulnerabilities from outside your organization coming back in to where you're at now. So, for example, we just testing this, I was able to actually see from one time when I've used it and stuff, just in testing and passing and everything, I was able to actually see where I could get into a firewall from this, and was able to actually contact and tell somebody that, hey, we were able to see your firewall from this, and show them the reporting from it. Just something to keep in mind. It is a great tool. It is a powerful tool. Like I said, these are additional security features from Microsoft that's outside the E5. Next one. Yes, Dean called out a very good point. Make sure you shut it down after the free trial. That's why we said 30 days, because if not, it's pretty expensive. One thing about that is, if you shut it down, you delete the instance. In 3 months' time, you can go back and spin it back up for another 30 days. Just make sure you put something on your calendar to say, hey, we need to shut this back down or remove it. For Defender for IoT, there's better experts than me on this, but this is something that Microsoft actually offers as far as another security service. It's going to cover, as far as EIoT, it's going to cover your printers, cameras, scanners, things of that nature. As far as OT environments, it's going to cover your SCADA, DCS, PLC environments. This is where, the difference between somebody that's just running an organization that has a lot of printers, camera, scanners, versus a manufacturing organization that's actually running a ton of equipment that's actually connected back into the network. Both would find uses from this. The difference is the EIoT versus the OT. The scanners that you put in place, you need to make sure that you're able to capture everything that's actually coming through that network, so that scanner is actually doing its job. And it's also a group-based license. It's not a single per device license as well. There's not a ton of content out there on this just yet. would like to get somebody to come and speak on this one in our user group at some time in the future, and everything that has a lot more interest or a lot more knowledge in this area, because this is something that I feel like a lot of people need. Any questions so far from me in the group? I see some things going on in the chat, and I see some people are actually helping cover those.
Yeah, Daniel, there was a question about, I think it was going back to the customer key and the Intune application of it. And James, since that was your question, if I got that right, just feel free to thumbs up or correct me if I didn't get to the essence of your question.
I was just making the comment that, like, for the future, like, application, like we talked about, like later sessions.
Yeah,
right.
Not necessarily
Good
the
idea.
customer key side of it.
Yeah, I think James was calling that out as a later topic that would be of interest.
Yeah, no, that's very fair. And I think too, we want to consider things like Sentinel, Intune, other sort of connective glue pieces that would make sense as well. Thank you.
Yep. And the last one I've actually got is something that Microsoft actually changed on October 30th. And this was for the Microsoft Intra ID governance license. This is actually separate from the Intra ID P2 license now. So from this, what you're going to actually be missing now from the Intra ID P2 that used to be included in the Azure AD P2 license is more of your access reviews as far as PIM, inactive users, machine learning assisted access certs and reviews, along with some of the reporting of inactive guest accounts, along with lifecycle workflows. A lot of people didn't see that this one was actually coming. And this one was something that just recently we actually ran across from some other articles and some other friends of ours in the community. All right, well, guys, I got you through the boring part. Next section, we're going to cover some Defender tips, just some high-level tips. Probably be a little bit some of the in-depth pieces too. Feel free to ask questions through this if you do have anything. If we can't answer it here, we will get some information out to you or get a session and stuff set up so that we can actually go through. One of the goals for this user group is to actually build a community where people can ask questions and others can answer, because we know that it's quicker to have a community sometimes than it is to be on your own or just trying to use the Google foo that we all have to try to search for what we need. Stop sharing real quick. All right. All right, guys. So right now we're going to go into just the security portal to start off with. I'm going to talk about some differences between what is sometimes relayed as a global policy versus just the AV ASR policies. So when we talk about global policies, if we come in here to our security portal, we scroll down to the very bottom, look for settings. And some of you guys are probably like, I've been through this 1,000 times. I don't need this part today. Keep in mind, there's probably somebody else that might watch this that would be helpful. But when we go through, we want to go to endpoints and advanced features. A couple of pieces I'm going to call out as we go through this is things that are have been added to this, along with things that maybe you don't have on now. So when we start going through these advanced features, enable EDR in block mode is one that you should have on as you're onboarding new devices, or you say you're in the middle of helping a company that's acquired some other business, right? And you're having to onboard those devices. You can actually take and enable EDR in block mode. And anything that they have in place as far as AV or another EDR solution, Defender for Endpoint will still run in the background, even though it's in passive mode, and still scan anything that's actually been missed from that standpoint. The other piece that I'm going to call out is this high potential duplicate device records. This is something that Microsoft graciously put in after Ignite this year that was not here before. This actually takes and makes it to where if you have, say, devices that are being seen in the environment, or that you've onboarded and then had to decommission, and then you've re-onboarded a new device for a user based on naming convention, and the old device was still being seen in the past, no longer do you have to worry about that. When it sees the two devices, it will actually choose the newer device that's here. It's also going to take and look for devices that were already discovered, but maybe it can be onboarded under another device name, and remove those from the portal as well. This actually cleans up a pretty good bit of things that we ran across for a couple of years from Defender. Same thing with tamper protection. Tamper protection's been there for about 2 years. I would recommend turning on tamper protection. This is what keeps Defender for Endpoint from being shut down or turned off, along with turning on your additional features. So when we talk about Microsoft Defender for cloud apps, as we get down, you'll see Microsoft Defender for Office 365. You'll see some other pieces for Intune integration. You'll want to actually turn those on, because that's actually giving you the XDR features if you've got your E5 license already, or if you're working with a client that has E5. The other one that I would actually call out, a lot of companies go back and forth on this as far as clients that I've talked to in the past, and it's something that I kind of stick to. You need to turn it on. This gives, as far as web content filtering, it's the same thing as what Umbrella was originally when it first started, before Cisco bought it and broke some things and then reinvented it. This gives you the ability to actually block pornography, exchange content, peer-to-peer sharing, downloads, things like that, all from the Defender itself, because Defender's being on the machine. It's actually giving you the ability for a local firewall, and it's really great to actually have that in place. Device discovery is something that I would recommend turning on. This is going to, especially once an environment's set up, it's going to give you the ability to see if there's an extra device that's actually coming on your network at any time and place. And this gives you the ability to see what devices can be onboarded or what devices should not be in your network or connected to your network. Usually when it says device discovery, it's not only finding a device on the network, it's also seeing a device that's actually connected to your Azure AD at some point, or it could be your local AD that's actually in a hybrid mode. Scrolling down, just looking at, the live response pieces, being able to take and turn those on, being able to run PowerShell scripts from the portal itself is very helpful for anything that you're actually doing. I would recommend turning these on. The deception, this is new since Ignite. It's being able to manage and deploy lures and decoys to catch attackers. This is almost like using a honeypot or a honey token that we would actually see not only in Defender for Identity, but other products that's out right now. And then, of course, we go back and we talk about Microsoft Intune connection. Preview features would actually be nice to turn on, because it's going to give you early access. And then from this endpoints portal, one thing I would actually also call out is if you go to enforcement scope under configuration management, as far as when we talk about looking at being able to integrate Defender for Cloud with Intune, this is an additional piece that you need to look at and turn on. So now Microsoft actually has it to where you can deploy out your policies for Linux and Mac OS, which they've been working on Mac OS for a while. There's one of the guys that's on the call here is Dean Ellerby. He's got some really great content on YouTube about Mac OS and using Intune to do the deployments and stuff there and manage those Mac devices through Intune. With this, if you turn this on, you can actually start your management of all your Windows client devices that maybe you don't have group policy or anything else actually associated with. This gives you the ability to actually use Intune for those policies, and I'm going to show you that here in just a second as part of the other tip. You also have your managed security settings for configuration manager. If you're still using an SCCM locally on your environment, this is where you would actually turn that piece on. We're just going to save that real quick. And then we're going to flip over to Intune. So in Intune, if you're looking at the homepage, you're going to have a lot more information here than what I do. This is just a kind of a CDX demo environment. But if you're going through and you're looking at endpoint security, and you look at Microsoft Defender for Endpoint down at the bottom, this is where your integration is going to happen. Most of the time, this will actually say unavailable or off. You can actually flip the switch. All of these settings will actually show up for you so that you can actually see that it's integrated and turned on. This is going to allow you to enforce the security settings right here. So when you flip this on, this is what actually makes it to where anything that hits the Defender portal or the security portal actually gives you that permission so that you can use Intune to manage your policies. Now, pretty much everybody on here has probably been through your antivirus policies at some point in time. One of the things I want to call out is if you haven't touched any of your antivirus policies since the time when Defender was actually called Advanced Threat Protection, you probably need to go back through your policies. The reason I want to actually say that is because there's been a ton of changes just in these policies. If you notice that Linux and Mac OS are now listed here, but the one that we're going to focus on today is just the Windows 10, Windows 11, and Windows Server. Underneath this, we also have the update controls. This is the update locations of where you're going to be applying updates from. You now have a separate exclusion policy, so you don't have to do your exclusions in your AV policy itself. And then we also have the Windows Security Experience. Windows Security Experience is for users that you want to lock out of the UI. So if you want to take and lock them out of the GUI from Defender for Endpoint, this is where you would actually do that. But we're going to work on Defender for Antivirus and show you a couple things that maybe you need to know today. So from a configuration setting standpoint, of course, if you want to move from a passive policy to an active policy, you need to allow behavior monitoring, cloud delivered protection, real-time monitoring, and of course, tamper protection is the global policy piece that you need to enable. One of the things that I want to scroll down and actually take a look at that a lot of people are missing right now is that Microsoft added some additional features to the bottom of the policies themselves. This actually happened in September of this year. So anything with DNS over TCP parsing, HTTP parsing, SSH parsing, all of these sinkhole channel connection updates, these were all added to your policies. So when you go to look at the policies that maybe you're deploying for clients or that you're taking and deploying for yourself for your own test environment, or maybe for the company that you work for, take and build a new policy, because you won't get these in the existing policies that you've already got built. You'll have to actually start a fresh policy. My recommendation is to build a fresh policy and actually test those pieces as well, because there is some additional things that you might want to know. One thing also is this disable local admin merge. Make sure that when you disable it, you stick with disable local admin merge, or people that have admin capabilities on the local machine can actually take and make changes for that. And I see that Bill asked a question for Defender logs. Are they part of the free logs in Sentinel? If you're using the Enterprise E5 license or you're using the E5 security license, they are free. Hopefully that answers your question, and I'll make sure that that goes into the chat as well. Is there any questions so far on just the AV policy? Does anybody have any questions on those? All right. And then for the other piece, a lot of things that can be missed when you're talking to, whether you're consulting with a client or you're working for your own company or even in your testing, a lot of things that are missed is actually your attack surface reduction policies. I can't tell you how many times I've actually gotten into an environment and they've told me that they're fully hardened, ready to go, everything's great, and there's no attack surface reduction rules. But if you start getting in here and you look at what's actually here as far as the platform, and we look at attack surface reduction rules themselves, let's see. We do a kind of a stagnant ASR policy. Even setting these to audit would give you a lot more information than what you knew before. This, I'm going to show you where you can find the report for this, but it's something that you should know just so that you can go through and make sure that you have one that's configured. Even if you go through and you set it all to audit so that you can see what's actually happening in your environment, because when you start talking about credential stealing or Win32 applications or API calls, if there's execution from potential scripts, JavaScript or VBS script that's actually running, that's trying to launch downloaded executables. This is things that you should be able to see in your environment to fully utilize Defender to its greatest potential. Outside of the ASR policies, there's one other policy that you guys should know about. And if you just choose Windows 10 and later, this has not been moved anywhere else. But under application control, be careful with this policy in Intune. One of the tips that I've got for you is if you go to implement this policy through your environment, this policy will actually take and cause a random reboot of devices in your environment if you're not careful. The reason I say that is because I've actually seen it on every client that I've ever watched publish this policy, randomly reboot if they don't turn it on with some type of after hours control to make sure that it's, and it doesn't matter what the configuration is, it will cause a reboot. So just keep that one in mind. As far as the ASR policies themselves, if you go into reports back in your security portal and you look under endpoints and go to attack surface reduction rules, this is going to be where you're going to find a lot of the reports. Same thing with the configuration. The configuration is going to tell you the ones that you have in audit mode, block mode, or warn. It's going to tell you if the rules are turned off or not. And then from there, you can actually add the exclusions of what's found. And I'll show you that in one of my other environments real quick. Let me swap screens because we're going to go into just a little bit of something different. Guys, thanks for sticking out with me so far. I know that there's a lot of content to cover for a typical user group. Much appreciated for everybody sticking in. So if we go back to the same reports, this is just in a different tenant that I've actually got some stuff set up in. We look at the configuration for what's actually here. This will actually show you, rules that are in audit, rules that are turned off, what the device ID is along with the device name. And then if there's any exclusions that need to be added, those would actually be from here. All right, last thing I'm going to show you guys, and then we'll wrap up with some Q&A and hopefully get some good information about what you guys are looking for next. If we go into Defender for Cloud, this is located in portal.azure.com. Just look for Defender for Cloud. This is the main page for what you're looking for. If you're looking to quickly adopt the servers that you are running Defender for Endpoint P2 on, and you're looking to put those into the Defender for Cloud environment, if you start looking under environment settings, and then we look at direct onboard, we can actually come in here. You can actually flip this on and then pick the subscription that you would like to actually associate those servers to. And that will actually bring them on from the security portal itself over to Defender for Cloud. One other thing I will call out is from here, if we start looking at the different demos that we've actually got set up and we go into the 3 dots, you can actually change your plan from plan 2 to plan 1 right here. Just if you want to actually look at what the difference is between the two. And that was just something easy and free for today. All right, guys.
Awesome. So I think we'll pause the recording and then